Elite runners train differently than beginners, right? Wrong. See, the truth might surprise you. Beginner and elite runners actually follow pretty much same training principles. The difference is not really the workouts, it's actually their mindsets. See, I'm Dr. Ray Peralta, physical therapist, run coach, exercise physiologist, and Marine veteran. For over 10 years, I've helped runners of all levels, from Olympians to absolute beginners, rehab injuries, get back to running, hit PRs, and stay injury free. In this video, I'm going to show you why elite and beginner runners actually train using the same core principles. And I'll reveal what truly separates those who succeed from those who stall out. We're going to break down the 5 principles elite and beginner runners share, the real reason elites get better results, and what mistake beginners make that keep them stuck, and how you can train like an elite even if you're just getting started. And if you want to run pain-free and consistently improve without injury, grab my free training, link in the description. So there's a massive myth. I talked to a lot of runners, and especially in the running world, that elite runners somehow follow some top secret training plan that beginners can never ever do. And here's the truth: the training principles are generally the same. Whether you run a 5-minute pace or a 10-minute pace, your plan should still include periodization, progressive overload, recovery, and specificity, right? That means specificity in terms of what you're training for. Whether you're training for a marathon or a 5K, you have to have specificity in your training towards your goal race. And what changes is really the volume and the intensity. That's it, like how much of mileage or volume an elite or more experienced runner is doing, and the intensity, how fast they're running their paces compared to the beginner. But the meat and potatoes, right? The basics, the foundation of the training plan looks pretty similar. You're actually not going to see that much of a difference. So the 5 core principles shared by all successful runners: periodization, right? You're going to have different phases or training blocks to build up towards a goal race, right? Whether it's a marathon or a 5K, you're going to have a base building phase, a peak phase, a taper phase, right? Then a recovery after the race. Specificity, right? Training that mimics the demands of your goal race, right? Again, if you're training for a marathon or if you're training for a trail race, right? You're going to be doing runs in on trails, or if you're doing it for an ultra marathon, right? You're going to be doing training specific to the type of race or distance you want to run. Or maybe you want to optimize for a 1-mile run, right? You're obviously going to be doing different types of workout for a 1-mile run race versus a ultra marathon or a marathon race, right? You're going to tailor obviously how many days, how the mileage you're doing, those things change based on the race type that you're training for, but they actually look pretty similar from a beginner to advanced. Sure, the advanced might be doing more mileage or faster paces, but the basics of the training actually look very similar. A progressive overload, right? So as you're training, you start overloading to start making adaptations. Right? You're not doing the exact same workout week after week. Looks the same for beginners and elite runners, right? You're gradually either increasing the intensity, how fast you're running, the paces, the power, or the volume, how much distance you're covering, how much time you're spending on your feet, time spent on your feet to help stimulate growth. And then recovery. Both elites and beginners both need to recover, right? They need recovery days, they need to sleep, and they also need to do active recovery modalities or activities to help allow adaptation, right? Whether it's cross training, whether they're biking or swimming, they're doing different types of activities, different cross training activities, and then obviously getting proper rest on rest days and proper sleep. That's going to help them truly recover. And then consistency, right? Showing up week after week, not just when it's convenient. So the big difference between beginners and elite runners is that elites stay consistent, year after year, day after day. They're consistent. Sure, they have an off week or so. They may even have an off month, but then go right back to it. See, a lot of beginners, they'll dabble in the sport. They'll maybe sign up for a race, maybe train for 3 or 4 months. Maybe they'll do a marathon, right? And then they'll fall off for the rest of the year. Then they won't train. They won't do anything. They may do some other types of activity, but they like drop off from running for the rest of the year. And then they pick it up maybe next year for another 4 or 5 months. Then they drop off again, right? So if you're only training, let's say 4 months out of 12 months, obviously the person who's more committed to training, to running, is going to make a lot more progress than the person who's dabbling and only training like a couple months out of the year, while the other person who's training closer to almost year round. Doesn't mean you train for a marathon year round. You could train obviously for different distances. You could taper down and do like shorter runs, but they're constantly trying to improve. They don't take multiple months off from running altogether. Again, So that's the big thing is actually consistent that mindset of like, hey, I'm always committed to being the best version, the best runner I can be, versus the beginner is kind of not so committed to the training process. So, what elite and beginner plans have in common? So, when you look at the training plan, right, you're like, okay, compare the training plans of an elite and beginner. They're very similar. Yes, they're different styles of training plan. There's different methodologies, polarized training, pyramidal training, the Norwegian method. But there's pretty much some consistencies, right? There's going to be long runs to build endurance. And we're talking about an endurance run. I'm not talking about sprinters. Talking about endurance runners, people who are training for like the 5K, the 10K, half marathon, marathon, ultra marathons, right? So they're going to have long runs. They're going to usually have some speed work, whether it's intervals or track repeats or hills or tempo runs. They typically have some easy runs to improve their aerobic base. There's going to be some strength training. There should be some strength training. If there isn't, then if it's not written in the training plan, oftentimes they're supplementing their strength training in a different plan that you're probably not seeing. But if I was the one who was running it, I'll tell you right now, that both the beginner and the elite are going to have strength training in their plan as well. Strength training at least 2 times a week to help prevent injuries. There's going to be some recovery runs to help absorb hard workouts. Maybe there might be less runs for the beginner because the body can't handle the volume of running. So maybe they're not running as often or doing as many days of running, but they're still doing generally the same types of runs, like easy runs, long runs, speed sessions. Maybe the beginner's only doing 3 days a week, while the elite might be doing 5 days a week or 6 days a week. But there's still going to be some recovery days. There's going to be easy days, or even days where they cross train, where they bike or swim. Right, the cross training helps reduce impact, improve mobility, and I at least recommend everyone do at least 1 day of cross training, right? Whether it's biking, swimming, brisk walking. Walking is like the ultimate type of cross training. Most people walk anyways, so you just brisk walk as type of your cross training, like a race walking or speed walking, as a type of cross training that you could do. And again, these elements don't really change between the beginner and the elite. Again, it's really just the pace and the volume, how much total volume or mileage they're getting per week. That really separates an elite. Maybe the elite's doing 100 miles per week. Let's say, talk about a marathoner, an elite marathon runner, might be doing like, 70, 90, 80, 90, 100 miles per week, while the beginner marathon runner might only be doing 30 miles a week. Maybe they start at like 15 or 20, then they build up to 30 miles a week, maybe even 40. But the elite is really like 60, 90 plus miles per week. But doesn't mean it's a hard rule either. There are some big, elite runners who also run lower volume as well. So there's some play there in terms of volume. But the pace is obviously going to be different, right? The elite runner is going to be running faster paces. Obviously, they have stronger legs to run faster paces. They're running the 5 minute per mile paces to be in that like Olympic time qualifier marathon, while the beginner runners may be running the 12-minute pace or 10-minute pace. Maybe they're running like a 4 or 5 hour marathon. So the real difference is actually mindset and lifestyle. So let me tell you a story. A runner once told me he didn't want to work with me because I personally hadn't run an Olympic qualifying marathon. One that's not even my goal. I'm not right now committed to running an Olympic qualified. Like marathons, not my main thing, but I do enjoy helping people train for marathons or different distance, 10K half marathons. I'm not like super in love with the marathon. It's again, that might change for me, but in the season of my life, that's my main priority. Anyhow, this athlete thought that, hey, since I haven't ran an Olympic style, fast marathon, that I wouldn't be able to help him. But here's the real deal. I've coached both Olympians and everyday runners, beginners, and their plans really don't look that different. When I look at their plan, elite runners think and act like athletes is the main difference. The mindset, again, the elite is thinking like an athlete. They treat their body like an athlete, not just the workouts, the things they do outside the workouts. They treat the recovery seriously. They don't mess around with the recovery. They eat to fuel the performance. They're not just eating junk food all the time. Now, you may see them have the occasional donut, cheeseburger. They may even have sweets during their training runs. They may even have candy, Skittles or whatever. But outside of training, they're still eating healthy. They're still eating clean. They're eating salads. They're eating fruits and vegetables, right? They don't just jump from random plans of doing dabbling in different workouts. They don't fall off and drop off for half the year. They stay consistent. It's that consistency, right? And the things they're willing to give up. They skip playing video games. They skip watching late night TV, Netflix. They prioritize sleep over social media. They fuel with whole foods, not processed junk food, gas station snacks. Again, not mean they never have those, junk foods, but it's not their main thing, right? Even though you're like, oh, but on the long run, you could fuel with, candy. Sure, but I'm talking about You're not doing long runs every single day of the week. And further, you still want to eat, fruits and veggies, to get your micronutrients, phytonutrients, things like that. And they show up for every workout. Again, they're consistent. Yes, they may change the style of work. Maybe they do an easy run or recovery run because maybe they're feeling sore or fatigue. They may do a cross training type of workout, or they may even take a rest day. But then the following day, when they're feeling energized, they don't just miss an entire week or two, unless they're sick or something, of course. But the beginner oftentimes dabbles. They miss weeks, they miss months, right? They're just not consistent. It's really consistency in that mindset. They're willing to sacrifice things. They're willing to sacrifice these comforts, right? Of like being on their phone, socializing with friends all the time. I'm not saying you can't socialize with friends, but the elite runner oftentimes, well, is going to willing to make the sacrifices, right? They sacrifice these things. They don't always going socializing, every single night, every single weekend, three nights a week socializing, right? They're make sure they're prioritizing sleep. They're again fueling properly. They're not always having dinners out, eating junk food, right? They sacrifice a comfort for performance, and that's what elite really means. That the actual training itself, they look very similar. They're both the beginner and the elite. They're going to run, right? It's just really the elite's getting more reps in because they're just consistent. They're getting more reps in. They're doing more volume. But I'm gonna show you. I've run 5-minute mile paces myself. It is doable. Yes, it's hard. It's just really staying consistent with a training plan. It's not something out of the ordinary. The elite just has that mindset that they're willing to make the sacrifice to actually commit to a training plan, while the beginner doesn't care. Even the intermediate, they may do it as a hobby. They may dabble. They may do it for a season, then they drop off again, and they pick it up again. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's really the only issue I have is that they somehow think that the elites are doing some kind of magical training plan. There's not some magic training plan that's going to make them an elite. It's really the mindset and the consistency with the training. The elite could follow the beginner's training plan and still make progress and results because they know how to progressively overload, do their hard workouts or their speed workouts actually fast. They're not like half-assing it, like just joking around with their friends doing speed workouts. They take their speed workouts seriously. And yes, it's okay to have friends and things, but they're willing to sacrifice having the beer nights, the drinking alcohol, the binge eating and stuff. They again treat their bodies like athletes. So it's not about pushing harder. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice, right? Are you willing to sacrifice, those drinks out with pals, right? Are you willing to give out on all those multiple date nights throughout the week, right? That's the real hard, the things you're willing to sacrifice so you could actually become like a competitive runner, if that's your goal. Now, if you want to be a hobbyist, that's fine too. Again, I understand that people have different goals, but to think that somehow elite and beginners training plans are that much different, they're really not that much different when you look at the the overall structure of like different phases of training. And if you want to train smarter, not harder, and run pain-free without injury or burnout, tap the link in the description and check out my free training.